Yeah, I gotta think about what's good for me and my family.
He doesn't need to be constantly searching for thrills.
I want the art to be unique and therapeutic.
I'm right about a lot of things that people have zero clue that they even know is going on.
He's about at his limit.
There's a darkness to you, Ron.
I'm a good man!
I'm just like, do it my way.
I'd rather die.
But I was able to survive, even though I couldn't pick.
I don't want people to stand on my grave and laugh.
I'm leaving no stone unturned.
When I was informed by my sources about a new Tim Robinson show, I made sure to watch it immediately, watching the whole first season in a day, and then I popped onto my YouTube channel to post the kind of deep insight that can only come from a seasoned media analysis YouTuber like myself. The Chair Company is like a surreal comedy version of Breaking Bad. Then I sat and waited for the internet to soak up my profound statement, but as the hours passed, I couldn't help noticing that the top comment by an ever-increasing margin was someone saying, "Guy who's only seen Breaking Bad." I was highly offended for two reasons. One, I have famously also seen Better Call Saul, please don't forget. And two, I clearly had not made my point. So, let's make that point. Think about it. Guy works a stable job, in the very first episode suffers a bad stroke of luck, and then spends the rest of the series pursuing secret goals to fulfill a sense of purpose.
We're gonna be goddamn heroes.
Both shows explore the human search for meaning in a world that's both too chaotic and too orderly. Too chaotic because, like how a cancer diagnosis can come out of nowhere, a chair can collapse under you unexpectedly. And too orderly because the world is full of unacceptable dullness, like a sad birthday handjob or the boring demands of moving forward with a mall construction project. The chaos that strikes our protagonist in each show, the cancer and the chair collapse, leads to a larger world of uncertainty and unknowns and lifts the lid off their realities in ways that invite them into underworlds that are as full of chaos as they are full of the opportunity for a sense of meaning and power. Unlike Walter White, Ron Trosper is thriving in his life when we meet him. Whereas we see Walter in the opening episode being disrespected and essentially being demoted at his second job, being made to do the dirty work at the car wash. Contrastingly, we meet Ron in the Chair Company as he's being promoted to project head of the new mall construction his company's doing. He might not be a rock star, but he's not as bogged down in dullness and stagnation as Walter. Nonetheless, like we see Walter disrespected by the world in the form of his rich student, we similarly see Ron feel a little shafted by the world as he's disrespected in the opening restaurant scene by a young person, the server to whom he has to explain that she most certainly has been in malls recently and that malls are still very much a big deal and definitely not a dying industry at all. Even though Walter's on the downswing and Ron's on the upswing professionally as we meet them in each series, this difference is minimized by the fact that Ron was forced by failure and circumstance back to working at his employer Fisher Robey after having to sacrifice his pursuit of his true passion, giving adventure and Jeep tours to people in Ohio. While the adventure and Jeep tours business may not have achieved the same monetary success as did Walter's former business Gray Matter Technologies, the Jeep tours business in Ron's past serves a similar role as Gray Matter does to Walter, as the work the protagonist did in the past that they had a real passion for as well as ownership and control over before being pushed by the world into this dull life we find them in. Walter may have previously risen higher professionally and has since fallen further, which may partially contribute to his greater desperation and willingness to inflict harm on others in pursuit of his sense of meaning and power. When Walter discovers the underworld around him, he fully joins it, whereas Ron interacts with the underworld as an adversary, a detective, and a vigilante. Ron is obviously not seeking to join Tekka, the company that quote-unquote manufactured the quote-unquote chair that collapsed under him so disastrously. He's also not seeking to compete with Tekka to do what they do but better, to profit in the field they work within. At least not yet. Of course, you could say there are some differences in what these underworlds really are that each is thrust into, with Walter entering a straightforward world of drug production and dealing, and Ron entering a less straightforward world of chair smuggling. But there are certainly points where the chair smuggling looks very similar to something we might see in Breaking Bad, and one of Ron's main theories for a bit is even that the chair smuggling actually is drug smuggling. While Walter joins the underworld around him for profit, and Ron looks into the underworld around him for justice, they both are doing what they're doing even more so for that good old-fashioned sense of meaning, power, and purpose that we all need in our life.
I'm doing something that's beyond what anybody could ever dream of.
Sometimes life feels routine and mundane, and the things we want to do or the feelings we crave to feel can be buried under the noisy demands of the things we need to do, the practical and pragmatic. Both our protagonists seek to ignore practical things from the beginning, with Walter ignoring the need to fix the leaking hot water heater being somewhat analogous to Ron neglecting the need to hire a security firm for the mall project. These mundane but necessary practical concerns continue to press, and we see the consequences collect, with Walter's neglect of the leaking water heater leading to family conflict and rot in the floorboards, and Ron's neglect for hiring a security firm leading to a security incident at the mall property location and professional conflict. There's also Ron neglecting the necessary practical concern of helping his son prepare for college. Each protagonist's search for meaning and power drives him in directions that involves neglecting his adolescent son, which leads to the son's acting out in various ways. On Breaking Bad, Flynn starts hanging out with a bad crowd, including the extremely nefarious but complex person Lewis. More about the concept of Lewis in a bit. And on the chair company, the neglected son Seth starts to drink alcohol more and more. Here we are led to another interesting point of comparison and contrast between the shows, which is that we see both teenage sons drinking and throwing up from drinking in front of the family and other people. But in the chair company, Seth drinks of his own free will rather than how Flynn is forced by his dad to drink. This comes back to the difference that Walter feeling so extremely scorned by fate partially contributes to him seeking to dominate those around him, whereas Ron feels scorned by fate to a lesser degree and is also seemingly more empathic and loving as a person, which is worth noting. Ron only seeks dominion over the forces that have been explicitly harmful to him so far. We do see some moments where Ron seems willing to dominate those around him if they interfere with his purpose, like when he confronts Douglas and rips the bubble necklace off his neck in a very Heisenberg core moment. Mostly, though, Ron just feels the need to get to the bottom of this chair situation. It started as a personal vendetta, a relatable experience for anyone who's gotten mad at the facelessness of a corporation. But as he comes to see the broad and severe range of mysterious factors at play, his journey becomes less about simply holding Tekka accountable and more about being the one to hold them accountable. It becomes an opportunity not just to get justice for himself, but to seek justice for others, to be the one fighting for that justice, and to be seen and see himself in that way. It becomes a deep motivation for him, and that's why when late in the season his wife Barb says,
I don't know what you want.
Immediately, Ron responds by making the 2-hour drive back to Delaware, Ohio, the day after having gone there and seeing the chairs. This is what he wants, to pursue Tekka. It's not a shocking overlap that both shows display a man trying to find new meaning in life, because after all, that is kind of a common thing we all experience. The meaning of life is often more of a question than an answer, as I talk about in an old video, and obviously a lot of shows explore the theme of someone finding new meaning in their life through a passionate pursuit. But everyone has their own somewhat unique way of searching for meaning, and I think comparing and contrasting these two shows is helpful in exploring two approaches to dramatizations of journeys of personal fulfillment, so we can reflect on maybe our own ways of doing this. What's our gray matter technologies? What's our adventure in Jeep tours? What's the old pursuit that really made us feel alive, that we may be seeking to recreate in imprecise or problematic ways in the present? What are the types of situations that cause people to lose control of their connection to their meaningful pursuits? How do we go about trying to regain a sense of purpose? And what are the ways we might go wrong in trying to regain this sense of purpose? For me, I find some amount of purpose in making strange video essays, which you can support with a channel membership or Patreon subscription if you want more of this stuff, or if you'd like to see exclusive videos and podcasts and other stuff I've got cooking. You can also find a bonus video with extra thoughts that couldn't fit in this brief video, so support the channel for that very important information. In Breaking Bad and The Chair Company, it is not just the protagonist who we see striving for a renewed sense of purpose. Most obviously and obnoxiously, Ron's boss Jeff struggles with a sense of meaning after his celebrity friend in his cigar-smoking boys club makes him feel comparably inadequate with the mundanity of mall construction.
There's a lot more creativity to my job than you might realize.
Jeff reacts to this encounter with a sort of midlife crisis vibe and starts making unreasonable demands on the people like Ron who work for him. Then we learn Jeff has long had a passion for singing and songwriting, of course, so maybe that's one of his healthier ways of making meaning, though it seems to have been hijacked by Stacy Crystals. We'll learn more about that in season 2, I'm sure, but now Jeff is here seeking excessive and irrational creative control over his team's already planned project in a fairly unhealthy way of making meaning. The show shows us Jeff's experience and even opens this episode with his getaway with the successful bro clique he's apparently just a small part of, to show how even the top dog of the company feels like a little puppy, in fact, and isn't quite fulfilled with his lot in life. A much different example is Douglas, Ron's coworker, who, when passed up for the promotion Ron gets, reacts by finding meaning through bubble blowing.
Work can be fun.
We might think this provides less of a sense of purpose, but who knows? Bubbles are kinda awesome. And also it represents Douglas's comparably greater satisfaction with his life circumstances, that he requires a smaller adaptation to feel fulfilled compared to Jeff, but certainly compared to Ron. Douglas is able to move on from the sorrow of not getting the promotion with just a little toy added to his day-to-day, whereas Ron is unable to move on from the embarrassment of the chair collapsing without a full investigation into the entirety of the circumstances leading to that outcome. Because keep in mind, even though Ron proceeds to investigate a seemingly real crime syndicate, he only gets that far because he's apparently unable to reestablish normal working relationships with his coworkers after the chair collapse. When he's back in his office the immediate next day, he almost moves on. He comes so close. He makes a joke about it and gets back to building rapport, but then something snaps in him and he reveals that in fact he is not able to move on.
Someone should get a hold of that company and let them know that their chairs could really hurt somebody, maybe even kill them.
He continues getting worked up and takes it out on a coworker.
Yeah, for anybody for that matter, Lewis.
That's the Lewis of The Chair Company, another great overlap between the two shows.
Lewis, huh?
This show has a complex character, Lewis, as well.
Lewis is a hero.
Oh my God.
He even gave him a bath before the paramedics got there.
So sweet.
This is what Ron wants. Ron wants to be a hero. It's not that he has an immediate desire to be a hero, it's instead that his general dissatisfaction with his circumstances predisposes him to experience a setback in a more profound way than someone who generally might be more satisfied in life, and so he can't rest until at least rectifying how people see him. When that goal leads him to an apparent opportunity to one-up how people see him and be not only not a loser but actually be a hero, the pull of this possibility is way too much to resist. And we see this dorky guy become badass and brave. Badass and brave again, because it was badass and brave of him to try to start his adventure and Jeep Tours business years earlier. It was comical, probably somewhat irrational, and probably irresponsible, but it was badass and brave, even if it only lasted a year. It was possibly less irresponsible and seemingly less likely to be harmful to himself and his family compared to his pursuit of Tekka. But when we compare one pursuit of meaning to another, it's hard to know which metric to use to compare them. If we compare them by how brave they are, Ron's pursuit of Tekka is more brave than Jeff's controlling of the mall project, which is more brave than Douglas's bubble toy. If we compare them by their obnoxiousness, Jeff's pursuit of purpose would be at the top, and Ron's journey with Tekka would be at the bottom, and maybe Douglas's bubbles would be less obnoxious or more obnoxious based on your perspective. And then maybe the guy with the wheelbarrow would, his love of his wheelbarrow would be at a similar level. I don't know. This is all subjective and not an exact science, you might be surprised to hear. An often important metric for comparing purpose-seeking behaviors may be practicality, or likelihood of succeeding. This can change over time, of course, but I'd say Douglas's bubble plan was pretty practical. Jeff's late-in-the-game changes to the mall are very impractical, and Ron's pursuit of Tekka starts fairly practical, but quickly becomes very, very impractical and unlikely. There's also a nice point in The Chair Company where we see a sort of comparison between two pursuits that differ in practicality. In the flashback where Barb tells Ron she's been talking to friends who went to business school and she's looked at how feasible it is for her to quit her job at a firm and start a business selling stylish breast pumps. From what we can see, it might be a humorously described plan, but it seems not too far-fetched, and she's done the legwork to prepare. Ron supports her, but also then announces his analogous but certainly more harebrained plan to quit his job also and go full-time at his dream of giving adventure and Jeep tours to people.
Let's quit our jobs.
Well, you too?
Yeah, we'll both do it.
And it's a wild, fun, nice moment. It's interesting that neither of them seem to have mentioned their ideas before to each other. Barb apparently wanted to wait until she was really sure about it to mention to Ron, and Ron apparently was waiting to mention his adventure and Jeep tours idea until he had an opening like this, I guess, where he feels not guilty about it because he's doing what she's doing, generally. Of course, both of them quitting their jobs at the same time is a bit risky, especially when Seth's college costs are not totally covered yet, but they can do what they want, of course. It's just a different thing for Ron to quit his job after Barb's decided than for Barb to quit her job on the assumption Ron would continue what he was doing. But it's fun, they're psyched. Obviously, it's nice to be impractical sometimes, especially when we're talking about a pursuit of meaning and purpose. Some people are going to be drawn to more impractical ways of achieving this more abstract sense of fulfillment. Also, if we're attracted to a pursuit, what's practical can change significantly as we become more excited to expend a great deal of effort. Often we're not considering the practicality of our decisions when we pursue something that generates deep emotions in us. It sort of has to be that way sometimes. I'm obviously overthinking a comedy show, but the point is that it's useful to actually consciously think about what your personal most important metrics are for determining your sense of the quality of a major life decision pursuing a sense of meaning and purpose. Are you looking for what's more brave, like Ron? What's more silly, like Douglas? What's more dominating, like Jeff? What's more practical and reasonable, like Barb? Or a million other qualities you may be seeking to consider in decisions like this. Our actions and decisions can be so complex that I think it's genuinely hard to definitively point to a specific reason as the cause of a complicated behavior like searching for purpose in one way or another. And because there's a complex set of causes behind our actions, and especially our more abstract and sustained choices, there's also probably a complex set of actions and choices that can be appropriate or healthy ways to express whatever motivations might be driving us at a given time. Our motivations and our actions are not in a one-to-one relationship. Just because we do a certain thing doesn't mean it's because we feel a certain way, have a certain want or need, or have a specific reasoning about the behavior. And just because we feel a certain way or have a certain want or need or have a specific reasoning doesn't mean we have to do a particular thing. The complexity of why we do what we do brings to mind the other side of the coin, the complexity of what we can do with the why, with the motivations or drives we have. To better understand why someone is doing what they're doing, it can be useful to think about what they're not doing when they make a certain choice, to imagine the rival hypotheses of possible behaviors. Like, Ron chose in this flashback to not wait a couple months, let his wife enjoy her professional transition while he manned the ship or whatever, and then make his change. Why do what he did and not wait? I'm not judging, I just think it's a useful thing to consider and to think about behaviors in general. Why did he do what he did and not do it? Well, was it even a decision, or was it an impulse? What's the difference, especially when it comes to spontaneous decisions? It seems like a classic situation of acting on emotion to an unreasonable extent, whether it's frustration with his job being amplified by his loved one following her dream, or jealousy, or something like that. But those are already quite different motivations, and we don't really know what specifically made Ron respond impulsively like this. If we said definitively that he did it out of jealousy, jealousy, we would be believing an assumption as a fact, but we know it was impulsive. He wanted to. It would be fun. Watch him dance. We do see a fair bit of impulsivity in Ron's behavior. The impulsiveness of leaving at night to explore the Tekka building immediately when he finds the address in an old photo in the rehearsal dinner slideshow he's putting together. Impulsiveness is not inherently bad, of course. He pops the half a deviled egg he took to go before leaving. He's feeling himself. His approach to life is working. He's riding the impulses like waves. We also see impulsiveness a couple episodes later when he invites Mike and the guy LT into his family home's garage just because Mike says he has new information. There's more impulsiveness when he then writes in Douglas's name when he's looking at the Tekka building deed. Then there's the impulsiveness of leaving a message for RBMG where he drunkenly yells and makes threats even though he had hours of waiting on hold to prepare for what he might feel less regret about saying. There's impulsiveness when he suggests to break into the guy's house who looked at the Tekka building deed before him as soon as the guy leaves his home. There's the impulsiveness of hitting the guy with the indented head in the indented part of his head. And then there's Ron's impulsive decision to steal the present out of Mike's hands for some reason when Mike shows up uninvited for Seth's party. In contrast, his overall decision to pursue Tekka is not impulsive. He's marinated on it for quite a while. He can't stop marinating on it, really, ruminating, perseverating. If anything, his pursuit of Tekka has been somewhat compulsive. Even the fairly quicker decisions are still consciously deliberated on, like when Ron is attacked by the hired criminal Mike Santini.
I'm Mike Santini.
Instead of deciding, wow, I'm in over my head, time to back out, he consciously decides to pursue Mike. And while Mike slips away, it's a moment where we see that Ron cannot help it. He's willing to pursue this cause even when it means seeking to get at a guy who just violently attacked him. If he did catch Mike, Mike obviously wasn't just going to submit to him. Ron was going to have to physically, violently overpower Mike, which he was seemingly willing to do. Though I'm glad he didn't, because that would have made it harder to see him as a hero, just like Walter White's violent choices in the first episode set his course to be very much an anti-hero, heavy on the anti. Another parallel between the two shows is that, like we saw Ron in the flashback sort of unintentionally steal the spotlight away from Barb's business by starting his own, in Breaking Bad it was of course Skyler's thriving short story career that Walter sought so desperately to overshadow. Skyler made Walt feel inadequate in this regard because he seemingly had never written a short story before, as far as we know. #release Skyler's short stories. Maybe more realistically, Skyler's search for meaning probably influenced her decision to go back to work at Ted's company, enjoy a romantic fling, and help him cook the books. No one is immune to the need for a sense of purpose, and a lot of the things we do are partially for practical reasons and partially for an abstract feeling of fulfillment and meaning, like Skyler taking this job or Barb with Everpump. Walter cooking meth is obviously a good example of something that's done partially for practical reasons to make money, but much more so for abstract fulfillment reasons, since there was another practical option to support his family, but it didn't give him the power and sense of empire that he was craving in the powerless and defunct feeling place he was in his life. Somewhat differently, Ron Trosper's pursuit of purpose in his detective work about Tekka is almost completely about a need for fulfillment and not at all practical by the end of the first episode. It's not like he's doing this all to make sure he never falls again when sitting down, and I think compared to the motive of earning his own sense of purpose, we can be skeptical about how genuinely central is the motive that he needs to do this to save other people.
Could cause mass casualties.
I think we can agree that he's acting like he needs to protect other people from what he went through, but not because other people really need him to, but because he needs to feel like other people need him to. After the ultimate embarrassment and vulnerability of having the thing that's meant to literally support him completely fail him, he's investigating Tekka because he can't resist the need to explain to himself why this happened fully and to remedy those negative feelings with the powerful feeling of getting one over on those responsible for his suffering. Another similarity is that both Walter White and Ron Trosper have challenges related to their memory of their past relationships with their father. Walter's father father passed away when he was a small child, so he missed a lot of time with him. Ron's father, on the other hand, made an imprint on his life as a very impressive person that set a high bar for Ron to live up to. A high bar, particularly in the sense of how helpful his father was, that he wants to feel like he can help people too, to a similar degree.
I mean, my dad helped people every day of his life. I'm not.
Remember how Ron injured that potential adventure and Jeep Tours investor because he drove so fast trying to make him smile? That's one way this tension gets expressed. Or it could be expressed as rudeness, his harshness as Seth's full-time basketball coach, probably a sublimation of Ron feeling that he never lived up to his expectations, in part influenced by his dad's successes. It wouldn't be surprising if Walter White's mean actions towards Flynn were somewhat influenced by his own dynamics with his father, in this case probably due to the lack of experience with being fathered as an adolescent, rather than high expectations like Ron feels. So when Walter seeks the least practical way of providing for his family, or when he almost gives up on his life entirely, he's fumbling for a sense of what a father is supposed to do. And when Ron follows this very impractical path towards Tekka, he's fumbling for a sense of how to help others. Of course, as noted, both of them have very little practical reason to be doing what they're doing. Walter's lying to himself anytime he considers himself to be selling meth for his family because he quite simply did not need to do that. He just needed to suck up his pride and accept money that seemingly was fairly rightfully his from his former business partner, Elliot. I'm not saying he should have done that. I'm saying that if the question is what is most likely to effectively and safely get his family the support they need, it's not him selling meth. The selling of meth accomplishes his other aspirations, though. Of course, this involves Walter doing a lot of dangerous stuff that potentially or actually brings serious issues into his family members' lives. Similarly, Ron, though he sees himself as trying to help people, actually puts his family members in harm's way to a significant extent, creating a situation where strangers are breaking into his home and so on. And in the way Ron's pursuit of meaning impairs his ability to work effectively at his job, obviously that creates some practical concerns as well. When equality isn't prioritized, its lack of fulfillment may at some point become a problem, and we see this when practicality is shafted so thoroughly from the decision-making process in our protagonist's pursuit of purpose. Like, what about the practical concern of how these pursuits of purpose impact relationships with family members? We mentioned Ron neglecting his son Seth, who's at an important transitional time in life. We actually see Seth mention malls over and over throughout the season, including from the first scene as he tries to support his dad's work and earn affection from him, and it's tinged with a bit of sadness. Little does he know that Ron barely cares about malls. He's got bigger stuff going on with Tekka. This might not be anything close to Walter missing Holly's birth so he can play with the big boys, but nonetheless, it's clear Ron lets his impractical mission overshadow practical concerns, but not as completely. Either because of the difference that, unlike Walter, Ron isn't really doing anything illegal, or the difference that Ron simply cares more about other people's feelings than Walter does, Ron does not keep his activities nearly as secret for nearly as long. Walter has sort of a "you wouldn't understand what I have to do" attitude towards his family, while Ron has a "please understand this thing I have to do" attitude. While Walter seems jaded about the possibility for human connection, Ron is instead fairly naive, not realizing the silliness that others perceive in his mission. His greatest success with sharing his Tekka journey with his family so far is with his daughter Natalie. Ron fairly quickly decides he wants her to know everything so she can revel in his bravery. The instigation for Ron telling Natalie about his Tekka pursuit is actually specifically that she says she admires him for taking a back seat and working at Fisher Robe so Barb can pursue her dream. He immediately tells her everything he knows and even speculates to make it clear that he's not taking a back seat to anyone. At first, Natalie is humoring her dad.
Wow.
She's trying to cope with him seeming insecure, and she's having flashbacks of him during the adventure and Jeep Tours era, when her mom had to comfort her that dad will come out of his hyperfixations eventually, and they should all just be supportive. It honestly reminded me of all the parents these days that are falling down conspiracy rabbit holes, especially with the extreme political radicalization in this country, where elites make bank from stimulating the pathologies that drive people into conflict with each other. Despite the overall silliness, Natalie's Natalie's experience here is maybe very relatable for a lot of people who have experienced a parent neglecting their responsibilities and treating their child as a comrade in arms against some imagined enemy, whether it's the devil, George Soros, or frankly, sometimes the other parent. So at first, she's in that frame of mind of feeling somewhat parentified, like she has to care for her dad so he doesn't fully go off the deep end. But soon enough, Natalie actually really starts to play an active role in the pursuit, despite worrying about her dad's well-being at the same time. Maybe this partly comes from her stress planning her wedding and struggling with some codependence patterns with her fiancée Tara. Then, even when Natalie knows her dad might be fired for pushing his boss and he's all over the place, she's still seeming to support his journey. She goes on the 2-hour drive to Delaware, Ohio and looks into the situation herself. She gets the on-leave purchasing director's address for him. She's used this opportunity to bond with her dad. Plus, it's interesting, and she's a bit sad when it abruptly ends in the season 1 finale, and he can't even explain why. Soon enough, Ron's telling Seth about it too, but all very vaguely. Seth doesn't get to enjoy the ride like Natalie did. The big question is what Barb is gonna think. Obviously, Barb is coming from a different place of actually being responsible for the family like Ron is. Tragically, at first, Ron all too quickly believes Barb's colleague George, who tells him that she was really impressed when she heard about his pursuit of Tekka. In fact, this is why Ron decides not to tell on Alice's scamming and ruin Barb's investor relationship, because he's told by George that Barb called him a superhero for the Tekka stuff. That she respected his pursuit of meaning made him decide to keep his knowledge secret and allow her own pursuit of meaning to thrive. His credulity comes crashing down when he learns that in fact Barb was not impressed by his detective work, but instead viewed it judgmentally or at best indulgently. What's worse is the context that this comes after the failure of Satisfaction regarding returning Bunny/Minnie Mouse turning out to be somehow a bad thing, then him seeing that Seth's chosen school RISD is very expensive, then Ron getting an email that he's being demoted from the project lead role he's been promoted to, and this all now culminating in the moment of Barb admitting she was making fun of his Tekka journey. He is at a low. This is a throwing pizza on the roof type of low. When he realizes his family members view his work on the Tekka case with semi-sad, semi-comical indulgence, he's hurt and he doesn't feel seen. He storms out when Barb reveals that's how she sees it. To be fair, he never really explained it to her, so he never took the opportunity to try to communicate about it accurately. On Breaking Bad, Walter is much less readily seeking his family to know about and approve of what he's up to for a variety of reasons, but it does sort of get there eventually. And anyways, when the truth does partially come out or start to come out and Skyler thinks he's selling cannabis, he actually goes out of his way to emphasize that he's actually in fact manufacturing meth. At this point, he's forced to admit it basically because Skyler is asking for a divorce, and maybe there's also a chemistry related dignity to Walter of what he's doing, that he's using his knowledge and skills to manufacture. There's a creative element to it. There's obviously a lot he doesn't tell her. In the comedy of The Chair Company, of course, we're dealing with much lower stakes, at least so far, and as noted, there's just a massive personality difference where Ron is more empathic and loving. We see Ron in the first episode crying, looking at photos of his family when putting together a slideshow for Natalie's wedding rehearsal dinner. Ron clearly loves his family.
I love you so much.
He clearly deeply wants to connect with them more as life is going by so fast. Walter's love for his family is much less explicit and less proactive and less of a motivating factor. But what they have in common is they don't seem to really have friends. Walter doesn't seem to have friends, and neither does Ron, though we know that back in high school he used to have a crew.
She wouldn't fit in with my crew.
They both do find friend-like relationships, though, in their pursuits of meaning and purpose. Ron with Mike Santini, obviously, and Walter with Jesse. Both relationships, though, are extremely practical and significantly transactional.
I could help if you pay me.
Yet, there's a lot more going on than just the transactions. When Walter's on the ride along with his brother-in-law Hank, who he has a superficial relationship with, he sees Jesse, of course, and in a situation where you can't deny it, Jesse seems kinda cool. The excitement, the drugs, sex, and danger, it may have attracted Walter as much as the news story with the drug dealer getting busted with hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's not much of a friendship, as it starts with Walter threatening and pressuring Jesse to do as he says. Their bond is like business partners characters who are also sort of in a two-person cult, but they spend leisure time together at least while the substances cook, and they provide a simulacrum of personal relationship in the sheer amount of time spent working together. It's a surrogate father-son relationship too, of course, as they each seek to sublimate their struggles and their relationships with their actual family members. With Ron and Mike, we see a relationship that similarly starts in an adversarial way, as Mike is paid to attack Ron, and then Ron spends a lot of time and effort tracking down Mike at his day job at Jan's Cafe, a diner that's like a Hieronymus Bosch painting come to life. They come to form a mutually beneficial professional relationship, like Walter and Jesse, but it veers into a surrogate friendship quicker and more significantly, with how they explicitly discuss the transactional nature of the relationship when Mike says he doesn't want Ron to pay him anymore. And Mike desperately wants to come to Seth's birthday party, of course.
It's just a small party. Sorry.
It's a little bit of a cursed surrogate friendship, as they only seem to have one thing in common, the Tekka mission, and Ron doesn't even seem able to appreciate the interesting radio programs Mike listens to. But it's something, and some of the time they spend together starts to resemble leisure and hanging out.
All right.
Cheers.
Cheers, we're doing something. Something's happening.
Ron in season 1 has not been comfortable really moving into friendship territory with Mike, but to be fair, Mike is sort of trying to skip the friend part and go right to being family.
You said we were family.
Ron did call Mike family so he could come into his hospital room and help him pretend that he wasn't in the hospital so Natalie didn't see. Ron was willing to use that label family for this practical purpose, but it has consequences. This is what leads to Mike saying, "Don't pay me," and "we're family," as well as being very friendly and calling him pal over texts. But Ron continues the transactional approach to bonding with Mike, soon calling Mike his friend because he wants help. Then in the last episode of season 1, he basically professionally breaks up with Mike and ends their Tekka journey because he thinks it's resolved that Alice is in charge, and he tells Mike to go back to his family, which Mike responds to by cursing him out, probably because it brings up feelings of how lonely he is, and it implies that their families are separate rather than them being in one family, because that's what he really seeks. Mike's card that he wrote to Seth demonstrated that on some level he is capable sometimes of being normal and pro-social. Of course, we see Ron reach out again to Mike after realizing there's this whole new layer with Jeff, his own boss, being a central part of RBMG. In the message he leaves for Mike, he specifically pulls on Mike's existential heartstrings, saying Mike helping him again will be a way for Mike to achieve what he said he wanted, people not laughing at his coffin and them both being heroes and so on. We'll see as things move into the next stage with Tekka how their bond develops. Mike clearly wants something deeper in this social connection than Ron does at the moment. Mike needs support. He's very lonely and sad.
I've never done anything good in my whole life.
Ron is sad too, as we mentioned, feeling like time is going by too fast. He's not only sad, he's also so alienated that we see him express his profound emotion nowhere more so than when he leaves a YouTube comment. In fact, it's where the first episode gets its title. That's the state of his world at this time, that at his most emotional, he's expressing himself in a YouTube comment. And he's specifically emotional about the idea of doing something with his life, or whether it's too late, something we all feel sometimes and which drives the search for fulfillment in whatever ways we can find it or want to find it. Often, this is simply through love and relationships that we find meaning and purpose. The lack of social life and casual friends of characters in these shows is not an accident, as we see characters desperately seeking a sense of purpose and fulfillment. Friendships are relationships that, while they may have some practical use value, in some ways exist beyond any use or practical purpose. The relationship is its own purpose. We generally hang out with our friends because we like to, not because we need to accomplish some other end. Okay, so I think we've explored some interesting themes and connections, right? Before we get out of here, I'll mention that I wasn't the only one to make this connection. Here's a Reddit post where someone made a similar connection. And I'm sure there are dozens more of us. Dozens. I don't know if I'm really beating the guy who's only seen Breaking Bad allegations, but hey, where I see patterns, I gotta mention them. That's what I do. Until the chair of life collapses underneath me and I'm carried into the next world by the outside wheelbarrow.
Okay. Well, that was nice. I feel like that was nice.
right? I feel like we all had a really good time, and we're all really glad I did that. Thanks so much for watching, and you can support my work if you want, and if you have disposable income on YouTube memberships, just become a member of this channel for like $3 or something. I forget how much it is. Or Patreon. They're about the same, just a different modality. But I post weekly podcasts, and 2 out of every 3 weeks is just for members and patrons. So, you know, something to consider. No pressure, but something to consider. I do appreciate it. I'm obviously a therapist, so I have a day job, but I do, you know, social workers aren't rich. People have a common misconception. So it would be nice if, you know, more people support this work. I do put a lot of time into writing these videos and editing the scripts for whatever reason. I mean, that's just something I'm trying to work out myself of why I do this. But, you know, money is nice too. So feel free to, you know, become a member, become a patron, check out the exclusive podcast episodes. Speaking of the podcast, you don't have to become a member of the Patreon to listen to the public podcast episodes. So head over to Verbal Journal. And if you don't even have time for those public episodes, head over to VJP Clips, the Clips channel, where you can just see the, you know, the good parts. Oh yeah, bonus video. I have to do that. So by the time you'll see this, there will be a bonus video. So check that out. Oh my God, all these extra thoughts, like, you know, all these random interesting thoughts that I need to keep talking about. So that will be in a bonus video right now. You can go check it out. It's right now. I'm just talking in the future because I'm recording this in the past. That's for the members and patrons, and then other old stuff on the membership and Patreon pages. You know what I mean? Going back to 2020, videos, music, all that fun stuff. I kind of do a lot of creative stuff. I'm not gonna lie, I do. And oh yeah, if you like the Breaking Bad video from a couple years ago, which I think a few people did enjoy. There's also like all this bonus stuff related to that, you know, all my notes and some extra, you know, conversations and, you know, errata for like erratic stuff. I think that's a word, right? Errata, an error. No, errata is an error in printing and writing. So no. I meant something else. Okay, so thank you to the members. I'll start with the members first, the members of this What's Therapy channel. Thank you so much to the Judo Joker, Riri, the Carbon Creed, the Real Coleycraft, Somewhat Entertainment, Jasmine, Simply Snaps, Gerbo, Hollow Moon, and Pit Inhabitant. And thank you to the Patreon patrons as well. Thank you. MJ, Burrow, User, Rabbit Dog, Brent, Miles, Madeline, Irene, Anastasios, Felix, JCS, Gripe Juice, Simply Snaps, Ryan, Redgrove, Icelak, Thulusaurus Rex, King, Noah, Matt, Garrett, Milky Way, Ben's Life, Not Dirty Harry, Scott, Ashley, Molly, Ludwig, Russ, Ian, Platinum Sarge, Elemancy, Hugh, Tom, X, MKA, Perpetually Jackson, Noah, Aiden, Dakota, Parker, Grace, Ryan, Isabel, Spaghetti Gal, Cool Beans, Stepan, Marcy Bun, Brandon, and on page 2, not to brag, M, Janie, PC, Andrew, Majid, Bean Machine, and Andreas. Thank you so much, y'all. And that's about it. You know what I mean? I just do this stuff because I have to or something. I don't know. I'm contractually obligated to some part of myself to just pursue these sorts of things. So, well, that's about it. And I'll catch you on the flippity flop. And yeah, check out the podcast again because I'm doing that every week, and I'm kind of making some strides with it. And eventually there will be more videos on this channel too, starting with this one. So, you know, things are looking pretty. Things are looking pretty good. Okay, bye.